Captain William Harrison stood perfectly still outside the grand oak doors of Kensington Palace, his red uniform pressed to perfection, and his black boots polished until they gleamed like mirrors. For 23 years, he had protected the royal family with unwavering dedication. His weathered hands gripped his ceremonial sword, and his gray eyes remained alert, scanning every shadow and movement in the marble hallway. At 55 years old, William had seen 3 generations of royals grow up before his eyes. He remembered when Prince William was just a mischievous boy running through these very corridors, and now he watched over Prince George, the young heir who would one day sit on the throne of England. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the ancient stone floors. William had memorized every detail of this palace, every creaking floorboard, every hidden passage, every entrance and exit. His knowledge of the royal residence was legendary among the palace staff. Prince George, now 12 years old, had always been different from other royal children William had protected. The boy possessed an unusual gentleness that surprised everyone around him. While other young royals demanded attention and respect, George quietly observed the world with curious, kind eyes. That Tuesday morning started like any other. William performed his usual security checks, coordinating with other guards and reviewing the day's schedule. The prince had mathematics lessons in the morning, followed by history, and then his favorite subject, art class with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly palace art instructor. As William escorted Prince George to his first lesson, the young royal walked beside him in comfortable silence. Unlike his grandfather King Charles or his father Prince William at that age, George never complained about his royal duties or the constant presence of guards. Instead, he often asked William about his family, his hobbies, and his experiences serving the crown. During the mathematics lesson, William stood guard outside the classroom door. Through the slightly open door, he could hear Prince George struggling with complex algebraic equations. The boy's tutor, Mr. Pemberton, was a stern man who believed in pushing his royal student to academic excellence. When the lesson ended, Prince George emerged looking frustrated and tired. William noticed the boy's shoulders slumped with disappointment. This had become a pattern over the past few months. The academic pressure on the young prince was increasing as he grew older, and William could see how it affected the child's natural, cheerful spirit. During the history lesson, the same pattern continued. Prince George sat through discussions about ancient battles and royal lineages, but his eyes kept drifting toward the window where birds played in the palace gardens. William had observed this behavior many times. The boy seemed more interested in nature and simple pleasures than in the weight of future royal responsibilities. When art class began, everything changed. Prince George's entire demeanor transformed as he entered Mrs. Henderson's bright, cheerful classroom. The elderly woman greeted him with genuine warmth, and William watched as the young prince's face lit up with authentic joy. Mrs. Henderson had been teaching art at the palace for over 30 years. She was a small woman with silver hair and paint-stained fingers who treated Prince George not as future royalty, but simply as a creative young person with artistic potential. Under her guidance, George had developed remarkable skill in painting and drawing. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson announced a special project. The local children's hospital had requested artwork from young artists to brighten their wards. She explained how art could bring comfort and hope to sick children who spent long days in hospital beds. William watched through the doorway as Prince George's eyes filled with excitement. The boy immediately volunteered to create paintings for the hospital, asking detailed questions about what kinds of images might make the children smile. Mrs. Henderson explained that bright, cheerful scenes often worked best. Animals, landscapes, or fantasy creatures that could spark imagination. For the next hour, William observed something remarkable. Prince George worked with intense focus and passion, completely absorbed in creating a painting of a magical forest filled with friendly dragons and talking animals. His brush moved with confidence, and colors flowed across the canvas like music. Other palace staff members occasionally walked past the art room, and William noticed how they too paused to watch the young prince work. There was something captivating about seeing this future king so completely engaged in creating something beautiful for others. When the lesson ended, Prince George carefully carried his wet painting to the drying area. His face glowed with satisfaction and purpose in a way that William had never seen during academic lessons or formal royal functions. The boy had found something that truly spoke to his heart. As they walked back toward the prince's private quarters, George surprised William by asking about the guard's own family. William shared stories about his daughter Sarah, who worked as a nurse in London, and his son Michael, who had recently started university to study environmental science. Prince George listened intently to these stories, asking thoughtful questions about William's children's careers and dreams. The boy seemed genuinely interested in understanding how people outside the royal bubble lived their lives and pursued their passions. That evening, during his usual security rounds, William reflected on the day's events. He had spent over 2 decades protecting royals, but Prince George was unlike any of them. The boy possessed an authentic kindness and curiosity about the world that set him apart from the formal, duty-bound atmosphere that typically surrounded royal life. William had noticed how Prince George interacted with palace staff. He always thanked the cleaning ladies, asked the gardeners about their plants, and remembered personal details about the kitchen workers' families. This behavior was not taught or performed for public relations purposes. It came naturally from the boy's genuine character. As William completed his final security check of the night, he found himself wondering about Prince George's future. The young royal clearly had artistic talent and a compassionate heart, but he was destined for a life of duty, protocol, and public service that might not align with his natural inclinations. Standing alone in the moonlit palace corridor, William contemplated the weight of royal expectation that would eventually rest on Prince George's young shoulders. The boy would need to learn statecraft, diplomacy, and leadership skills that had nothing to do with his obvious artistic gifts or his desire to help others through creative expression. That night, William went home to his small apartment near the palace, but his mind remained occupied with thoughts about the young prince. He had served the royal family faithfully for decades, but watching Prince George struggle between his natural inclinations and royal expectations stirred something deep within the experienced guard. The next morning brought news that would change everything. William arrived at the palace to find unusual activity in the administrative offices. Senior palace officials were holding urgent meetings, and there was an air of anticipation that something significant was about to be announced. Prince George appeared for his morning lessons as usual, but William noticed the boy seemed distracted and thoughtful. During breakfast, the young prince had asked his parents several serious questions about royal duty and personal choice, though William only learned this later from other staff members who had overheard the conversation. The morning lessons proceeded normally, but William could sense that Prince George's mind was elsewhere. The boy completed his work dutifully, but without his usual effort to excel or please his tutors. Something had shifted in the young prince's thinking, and William's experienced instincts told him that change was coming. When art class arrived that Wednesday afternoon, Prince George entered Mrs. Henderson's studio with unusual determination. William positioned himself at his regular post outside the door, but something felt different about this particular lesson. The young prince carried himself with a quiet resolve that William had never seen before. Mrs. Henderson welcomed George warmly as always, but she too seemed to notice the change in his demeanor. Instead of immediately beginning work on his hospital painting, the prince asked if he could speak with her privately about something important. William heard the request through the slightly open door and felt a flutter of concern in his chest. The elderly art teacher invited Prince George to sit in the comfortable chairs she kept in the corner of her studio for thoughtful discussions about art and creativity. William could hear their conversation, though he tried to focus on his security duties rather than eavesdropping on what was clearly a personal moment. Prince George spoke quietly but clearly about his love for art and his dream of using creativity to help people. He explained how painting made him feel more alive and purposeful than any of his academic subjects or royal training sessions. Mrs. Henderson listened with the patience and understanding she had shown to countless young artists over her long career. The conversation continued for nearly 20 minutes, with Prince George asking serious questions about art as a career and whether it was possible to make a real difference in the world through creative expression. Mrs. Henderson spoke about artists who had changed society through their work, bringing beauty and hope to dark times throughout history. William found himself deeply moved by the earnest passion in the young prince's voice. He had protected many royals over the years, but he had never heard one speak with such genuine conviction about following their heart, rather than simply accepting their predetermined path. When the lesson officially began, Prince George worked on his hospital painting with renewed intensity. He had decided to create a series of interconnected artworks that would tell a story of hope and healing. Each painting would show different characters overcoming challenges through friendship, courage, and kindness. As William watched through the doorway, he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. This 12-year-old boy, destined to be king, was pouring his soul into creating art that would bring joy to sick children he had never met. There was something profoundly moving about the prince's selfless dedication to this project. That evening brought unexpected developments. Prince George requested a private meeting with his parents, Prince William and Catherine. Palace staff whispered about the unusual nature of this request, as formal family meetings were typically scheduled well in advance and concerned official royal business. William was not privy to the details of that conversation, but he could see its effects over the following days. Prince George appeared more thoughtful and determined, while his parents seemed both proud and concerned. The atmosphere in the royal quarters shifted subtly, with more quiet discussions and fewer casual interactions. On Thursday morning, Prince George asked William a surprising question during their walk to lessons. He wanted to know what it felt like to choose a career dedicated to serving others, and whether William had ever regretted not pursuing a different path in life. The question caught the experienced guard off balance. William found himself sharing more personal thoughts than he had ever expressed to any royal family member. He spoke about his early dreams of becoming a teacher, and how his sense of duty had led him to protective services instead. He explained the satisfaction he found in keeping people safe, but also admitted wondering sometimes about the path not taken. Prince George listened to every word with the intense focus he usually reserved for his art projects. The boy asked follow-up questions about finding meaning in work and balancing personal desires with responsibilities to others. These were remarkably mature questions for someone so young. During mathematics that morning, Prince George's behavior surprised his tutor, Mr. Pemberton. Instead of struggling through equations with visible frustration, the prince approached the lesson with calm determination. He still found the subject challenging, but his attitude had changed completely. When Mr. Pemberton asked about this improvement, Prince George explained that he had been thinking about how mathematical concepts might apply to art and design. He wondered if understanding geometry and proportions could make him a better artist. This creative approach to academic subjects impressed the typically stern tutor. The history lesson that followed showed similar changes. Prince George engaged actively with discussions about past royal leaders, but his questions focused on how those rulers had balanced personal convictions with royal duties. He seemed particularly interested in monarchs who had made difficult choices to follow their consciences. Mrs. Henderson noticed these changes when Prince George arrived for art class that afternoon. The young prince had brought a notebook filled with sketches and ideas for his hospital art project. He had spent the previous evening planning an entire series of paintings that would create an immersive, hopeful environment for sick children. As Prince George worked on his latest painting, he talked quietly with Mrs. Henderson about the power of art to heal and inspire. He had researched famous artists who had used their work to address social issues and bring comfort to suffering people. The depth of his research and the maturity of his thinking amazed his elderly teacher. William observed this lesson with growing admiration and concern. The young prince was clearly developing strong convictions about his desire to use art for humanitarian purposes, but William knew the challenges this would create within the rigid structure of royal expectations. That evening, William received an unexpected summons to meet with senior palace officials. This was highly unusual, as guards typically reported through established chains of command rather than meeting directly with administrative leadership. William approached the meeting with curiosity and some apprehension. The meeting took place in one of the palace's formal conference rooms. Present were the private secretary to the Prince of Wales, the deputy private secretary, and the head of royal security. William was invited to sit at the polished mahogany table, which felt strange after decades of standing at attention. The officials explained that they valued William's perspective as someone who had observed Prince George closely over many years. They asked for his assessment of the young prince's character, interests, and potential challenges as he grew into his future role. William was encouraged to speak frankly about his observations. William chose his words carefully but honestly. He described Prince George as an exceptionally kind and thoughtful young person with genuine artistic talent and a strong desire to help others. He mentioned the prince's natural ability to connect with people from all backgrounds and his unusual maturity when discussing serious topics. The officials listened intently to William's assessment, occasionally asking for specific examples or clarifications. They seemed particularly interested in his observations about Prince George's artistic pursuits and his interactions with palace staff and his art teacher. When the meeting concluded, William was thanked for his insights and asked to continue his careful observations of the young prince. He was also reminded of the confidential nature of their discussion, though this reminder felt unnecessary given William's decades of discretionary service. Walking home that night, William reflected on the unusual events of recent days. The formal meeting had confirmed his sense that something significant was developing regarding Prince George's future. The palace administration was clearly aware of the boy's artistic inclinations and was considering how to address them. The following morning brought a surprise that would change everything. Prince George requested permission to visit the children's hospital personally to deliver his completed paintings. This was not a typical royal engagement planned months in advance, but a genuine desire by the young prince to connect directly with the children who would benefit from his artwork. William was assigned to accompany Prince George on this visit, along with a minimal security detail. The hospital had been contacted and arrangements made, but this would be an informal visit focused on art rather than royal protocol. Prince George insisted that he wanted to interact naturally with the children rather than following formal procedures. On the drive to the hospital, Prince George sat quietly beside William, clutching a portfolio containing his finished paintings. The young prince seemed nervous but determined, like someone about to take an important step toward defining their own identity. When they arrived at the children's hospital, William watched as Prince George transformed. Away from the formal atmosphere of the palace, the boy's natural warmth and genuine curiosity about others shone brightly. He spoke with young patients about their own artistic interests and listened intently to their stories. The impact of Prince George's visit was immediate and profound. The children responded to his authentic kindness and enthusiasm for art. Several young patients showed him their own drawings and paintings, and the prince treated each artwork with the same respect and attention he would give to a masterpiece in a museum. William found himself moved by what he witnessed that day. This was not a formal royal duty being performed with practiced politeness, but a young person following his heart and making genuine connections with others through shared creativity and compassion. The return journey to the palace was filled with quiet reflection. Prince George sat beside William in the royal car, his eyes bright with satisfaction and purpose. The young prince had found something that morning that went far beyond completing a school project. He had discovered the profound joy of using his gifts to bring happiness to others. When they arrived back at Kensington Palace, William noticed an unusual level of activity in the administrative wings. Several senior officials were moving between offices with an urgency that suggested important developments were underway. The atmosphere felt charged with anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for significant news. Prince George returned to his afternoon lessons, but his tutors immediately noticed the change in his demeanor. He approached his studies with renewed focus, asking thoughtful questions about how his academic subjects might connect to real-world applications. His mathematics tutor, Mr. Pemberton, was particularly impressed by George's questions about using geometric principles in architectural design for public spaces. During his history lesson, Prince George engaged his instructor in a fascinating discussion about royal patronage of the arts throughout British history. He had clearly been researching how previous monarchs had supported artists and cultural institutions, and he wanted to understand the impact these relationships had on society. William observed these changes with a mixture of pride and concern. The young prince had clearly found his passion and was thinking seriously about how to integrate it into his future role, but William knew the complexities this would create within traditional royal expectations. That evening, Prince George requested another private meeting with his parents. This time, the conversation lasted much longer, and William could sense its importance from the serious expressions on the faces of palace staff who moved quietly through the corridors afterward. The following morning brought news that would shock the entire royal establishment. Prince George had made a decision that demonstrated wisdom far beyond his 12 years, but would also challenge centuries of royal tradition in the most gentle yet revolutionary way possible. William learned about the decision when he was summoned to an emergency meeting with Prince William and Princess Catherine. They asked him to sit down in the informal family sitting room, which immediately told him this conversation would be different from any he had experienced in his 23 years of royal service. Prince William spoke first, his voice filled with both pride and uncertainty. He explained that Prince George had requested permission to dedicate significant portions of his future royal duties to arts education and therapy programs for children facing difficult circumstances. The young prince wanted to establish a new model of royal service that focused on using creativity to heal and inspire. Princess Catherine continued the explanation, describing how Prince George had presented them with a detailed plan for integrating artistic pursuits into his royal education and future responsibilities. He had researched existing charitable organizations working with art therapy and had specific ideas for expanding their reach through royal patronage and personal involvement. The most surprising aspect of Prince George's proposal was his request to spend part of each year working directly in hospitals, schools, and community centers, not as a visiting royal dignitary, but as a hands-on volunteer using art to help children process trauma, build confidence, and express themselves creatively. William listened to this explanation with growing amazement. The young prince had essentially redesigned the concept of royal duty to align with his personal values and talents, while still honoring his commitment to serve the public good. It was a brilliant solution that no one had anticipated. Prince William explained that George's proposal had forced the entire royal family to reconsider traditional approaches to royal service. The boys' passion and well-researched arguments had convinced them that new models of leadership might be exactly what the monarchy needed for future relevance and impact. However, Implementing such dramatic changes would require careful planning and gradual introduction. The royal family needed trusted advisors who understood both traditional protocols and the innovative vision Prince George was proposing. They wanted William Harrison to consider a new role as special advisor during this transitional period. The offer was both flattering and overwhelming. William would be promoted to a senior advisory position, helping to develop and implement Prince George's vision while ensuring appropriate security measures remained in place. It would mean leaving his traditional guard duties to become part of the planning team for a revolutionary approach to royal service. But as William considered this opportunity, he realized something profound about his own life journey. Watching Prince George follow his passion with such courage and conviction had awakened something in the veteran guard that had been dormant for years. The boy's example had reminded William of his own abandoned dreams and the possibilities that still existed in his life. That evening, William walked alone through the palace gardens where he had maintained security for over 2 decades. The familiar paths and carefully manicured landscapes had been the backdrop for his entire adult life, but now they felt like the setting for a major transition rather than the comfortable routine he had always known. He thought about his daughter Sarah, whose nursing career brought her daily satisfaction through helping others heal and recover. He considered his son Michael, who was pursuing environmental science because he wanted to protect the natural world for future generations. Both of his children had followed their hearts into careers of service, just as Prince George was now choosing to do. The next morning, William made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He met with Prince William and Princess Catherine to respectfully decline their generous offer of an advisory position. Instead, he submitted his formal resignation from Royal Guard service, explaining that Prince George's courage in following his passion had inspired William to pursue his own long-delayed dreams. William revealed that he wanted to return to his original aspiration of becoming a teacher. At 55 years old, he planned to pursue the education credentials needed to work with young people, possibly in programs that combined security training with character development. He wanted to help prepare the next generation of protective service professionals while also teaching them the importance of following their convictions. The royal family was initially shocked by William's decision, but they quickly understood and respected his choice. Prince George was particularly moved when he learned that his own courage in pursuing art had inspired someone he admired to make a similar choice for authentic life direction. William's final week at the palace was filled with meaningful conversations and heartfelt goodbyes. Prince George spent considerable time talking with him about the importance of making decisions based on personal values rather than external expectations. The young prince had learned as much from William's example as William had learned from his. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly art teacher, was delighted to learn about William's career change. She offered to help him explore ways to incorporate creative elements into his future teaching, suggesting that security training could be enhanced through artistic approaches to observation, pattern recognition, and situational awareness. On his last day of service, William stood once more in the marble corridor outside Prince George's classroom, but this time as a farewell rather than a routine duty. The young prince emerged from his lesson and walked over to speak with him privately. Prince George thanked William for years of protection and guidance, but more importantly, for showing him through personal example what it meant to serve others with integrity and dedication. The boy explained that watching William's quiet professionalism and genuine care for people had taught him important lessons about leadership and character. William was deeply moved by the young prince's words, but he was equally impressed by the mature way George was handling the transition. The boy understood that William's departure was not abandonment, but rather an inspiring example of personal growth and authentic choice-making at any stage of life. As William walked out of Kensington Palace for the last time as a royal guard, He carried with him memories of protecting 3 generations of royals and the satisfaction of having served with honor and distinction. But he also carried something new: excitement about the future and gratitude to a wise young prince who had reminded him that it is never too late to follow your heart. Prince George continued his royal education with renewed purpose and clarity about his future path. His innovative approach to royal service would eventually transform public expectations about monarchy and inspire other young leaders around the world to integrate their personal passions with their responsibilities to serve others. William Harrison began his new career in education with the same dedication and integrity he had brought to royal service. He became known as an exceptional teacher who helped young people understand that true security in life comes from having the courage to be authentic while serving something greater than yourself. Years later, William would often tell his students about a remarkable young prince who taught him that wisdom sometimes comes in small packages, and that the most important protection anyone can provide is helping others find the courage to follow their dreams while remaining true to their values and commitments to others.